Thanks for having me. I just wanted to first do a little thing that we do in Australia, which is where we're from, which is called an Acknowledgement of Country. And so, yeah, my background is Indigenous Australian. Australia has been around with Indigenous people for about between 70 and 90,000 years. And so, as you can see on this map here, there was over 200 and something different countries within Australia. So for all those thousands of years, people looked after boundaries like they were streets or postcodes. And so what used to happen is that you would walk up to a boundary and you would wait, and then you'd make a sound, or you would announce your presence. And then after the right amount of time, whether it's a few minutes, a few days, a few weeks even, you would receive a response. And so this was a way of maintaining a very beautiful, balanced out ecosystem. And then you would proceed to onto other people's land. So from one generation to the next, these boundaries would change. So it was a living country. And so what we do now it's become a little bit politically stale, but going back to what it was used for, we like to acknowledge the people of this country, and everyone else for that matter too. So can people see my ridiculously large mouse cursor? So my people from up here, Borroloola, which is one of the little tiny countries up here. I live in Sydney down here, and I would like to acknowledge all these wonderful, beautiful ancestors that have been here for thousands of years. And lovely Olivia is down in Wurundjeri country. Ian is up in Bundjalung country, and I am normally in Gadigal country, although I'm overseas at the moment. So I just wanted to do a little bit of an Australian thing to start with. So my name's Tim Moriarty. I'm Indigenous Australian. My Aboriginal name is Bundian, which means cheeky brown snake. And I'm very lucky to have a strong connection to my background in Indigenous history. So, yeah, so welcome, everyone. So also wanted to show a little bit about our country before we move on. And I am blown away by the incredible intellect and clarity and all the incredible work people have done over the last couple of days, watching some very, very intimidating but also inspiring, very, very clever people. So I thought I'd change tact a little bit with our group. Will be a little bit about philosophy, a bit about why with AI, but I wanted to show you a bit about our country. So this is Western Australia. And in Western Australia, we've got rock art up Wandjina, which is between 11,000 and 50,000 years old. And it's about our ancestral beings. So this is about the style of Indigenous culture. Again, I apologise. I'll keep coming to an Indigenous angle as we've decided to focus on culture and wisdom. And lovely Olivia and Ian will tell you about their focuses. So this is Western Australia. This is the Kimberley. This is a very special land to a lot of artists that are renowned. And this is where I currently live, which is New South Wales, which is a Sydney shop. And like I said before, my family came from Borroloola. So this is a monolithic ancient structure called the Lost City. So that's a little bit about what Australia looks like. So I wanted to talk about where I've come from. And that is that for us Indigenous people, we didn't have a word for art, and we didn't have a word for culture. And so art was literally science. It was about storytelling. It was about how we preserve a science and a very sensitive relationship to the land with the world's oldest ecologists. And so all of that information was passed down through song or image, art, or dance, movement. And so these three vehicles, it was what we call now creativity. So a very different concept back then. So in this incredible world of AI, and technology for that matter, we're looking to say, how can we start to regenerate some of this cultural loss? And there's some not very nice statistics that people may or may not be aware of, but there was invasion of Australia. That's how we've formed this balance at the moment. So there's a lot of very negative connotations with Indigenous culture. So I won't be focusing on that. My my body of work over my career, and I'll show you some bits and pieces, has been a very positive approach, and I very much honour the negative stuff that's happened, but I wanted to focus a little bit on where we're going. Okay, so this is a little bit about my background. As I said, I've been, didn't actually say, but I'm an artist, and my expression has been in the musical arena as well as visual arts. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, for example, this is a piece that I have built, and it's being built at the new airport. So you can see in the middle here, you've got the ancient kind of, we call them sky stories. So in a modern context, how can we turn this experience into what's in a modern language, you know, instead of a painting? So this piece has been built at New Airport. It's about 30 to 40 meters tall. When you're flying into the country in the right alignment, you will see for a brief second all these lights line up and you see the emu dreaming, and it's a welcome just like we had before. So that's an example of translating a principle, which is you have to be in the story, which is moving. It's about connectivity, and this is the outcome. So thinking about this point as a translation piece, I'm going to come back to some of these things later. And I have found a technology company called Jalili, and we've based this basically on Indigenous principles that have now become universal. And I think this is very fitting because I'm just going to go through some of these things that are their principles. So imagine 16 years ago, I was out in the country. You saw some of those pictures before. And here I am watching some of these kids, exceptional rhythm, exceptional creativity, great spatial awareness, but no opportunity. And so I'm so lucky I grew up in the city. I had, and the bush, so backwards and forwards. I'm very privileged to have a foot in both worlds. And I gained my confidence and my self-expression, and you could call self-determination, through music. And so I thought, oh, it's really unfair. What do kids do with their need to stimulate their brains? They'll get into trouble, antisocial behaviour, substance, throwing rocks at things, exactly the types of things I would do if I hadn't been lucky enough to have this path. So, yeah, so I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if all those things like socio-economic boundaries or access to technology, access to equipment, you could just take that off the playing field and suddenly you could hotwire this beautiful talent, these cultural stories, and we could share that with the world. So that was the founding principle. So Indigenous people have a very, Australian Indigenous have slightly different cognitive profiles. And I'm going to talk again a little bit later at a few use case scenarios, such as environmental intelligence and how we function and why we've had problems fitting in to a mainstream, school without such compassion. And so I want to talk about that later when we go into a roundtable discussion. But I wanted a technology that embraces the different ways that people learn or create. So AI is just perfect for this. You know, AI can meet people where they are at. So we've spoken about the low socio-economic disadvantage, and this is just a metaphor, by the way. Indigenous focus is for me, but this applies, I think, something we can take to the world. And I know that a lot of you wonderful people have started to cover some of these things in our previous speeches. Another thing is place should not restrict where you are creating things. So, you see those paintings earlier on. The beauty of these things, I can go back. So this artwork here is by a very, very famous artist called Emily Uware. And people probably don't realize that a few years ago, that one, the highest paid artwork in Australia was one female and two Indigenous. And she started painting at a very late age in her late 80s. No training, no formal training. One of her pieces was owned by Elton John, sold for $5 million. So beautiful national treasure. And you can see the color, how it relates to her country. So we have a strong association with country based on story. I'll just find my place here. And if there's a sense of disconnection, then we're not going to be able to self-express. And that may go for other cultures as well. So music, for example, I didn't much appreciate the fact that if I'm going to write music, I have to do all this training. I have to be in a little dark room with cables and software. But what about being able to create anything in a different context, such as on a basketball court or in country? So that's another founding principle. With this technology, we can open that up. I'm going to cover this a little bit later again in the round discussion, but we've got a lot of custodial structures which have been handed down for thousands of years. So another variation is songlines, which governs such things as permissions, just like the Welcome to Country, permissions and information about family and who can intermarry, all those types of sciences woven into that kind of thing. So in that, it was recognized that many people have different roles in society. And so, again, AI is now a mechanism that can to meet people where they are at. So we also wanted to dive into the neuroscience of music and healing. The didgeridoo is an example. I'm sure people are aware of that instrument. It's a long piece of wood which is hollowed out naturally by white ants, and they're cut down, they're a ceremonial object. But what happens neurologically is over tens of thousands of years, the low frequency range and the incredible precision that is used in ceremony and song and rhythm develops a different part of the brain. So we want to learn what this does, how it does it, and can we use this in healing? And again, we've spoken about connecting with country. So yeah, so that's formed me. Sorry, this is what has inspired me. Come on, you silly thing. This has inspired me with an incredible team of people in Sydney to create this music platform. We think that making music should be available to everyone and every community. Now, the problem that we have is that a lot of our competitors and other AI movements scrape people's data. There's no respect of copyright. I mean, why would there be? Because they can do it. There's no boundaries. There's no jurisdictions. And so we've got a huge era of data anxiety, and I think rightfully so. So we would like to mimic in our security policies and the way that we create this software, how do we respect people's stories and people's data and people's creativity in a creative economy that we are building. And again, we'll talk a little bit about policy later. So people like to work in different ways. Some like to be collaborative, others like to work individually. And so recognizing these different ways of working is a really wonderful way that AI in our culture can embrace that. So another overall mission point is that we want technology to be a partner to us, not something that is done at us, not something that we don't really understand, but how can it build and strengthen our culture? How can it show once that happens, a lot more people can understand the beautiful, important parts of our culture that, like I said before, politically has been overlooked or misunderstood, because a lot of people have a lot of guilt about what's happened in Australia. We make up 3.8% of the Australian population, and which is about 900 and something thousand people, less than 1 million people population, which is tiny. And so a lot of wonderful people have this sense of guilt, and so there's a big disconnect. So how can we have an AI technology that can build compassion on both sides of the fence to join people together, which is probably one of our biggest internal missions, if it's an Australian focus, but we want this to be global. So and we spoke about this before. Many different neurodivergent types of people have different ways of creating different aspects that I'd like to use this for. So how can we think about AI supporting that, not being merged into one big homogenized blob? And we'd also like people to feel safe. So there's a big sense of unsafety, lack of safety, I should say, in cultures all around the world, especially so with Indigenous Australia. So we think that's a good metaphor or paradigm to work around and to work with, to then share that with the rest of the world. So the bigger picture is that we want to translate these Indigenous principles in AI and influence policy. And we want to have a place where all people are enabled and empowered, and not just a select band. I was in a policy discussion for the Australian government, because at the moment we are scrambling to develop policy, and the technology is just rapidly happening so much faster than policy can keep up with. Yeah, so I thought we'd pick out some points about compassion, and in a creative and safe environment, people need to feel nurtured and safe, and that their difference is a great thing, not something that's going to be a problem or people be shy about. So here are some of the we've decided to go a little less what's mainstream, and I know these probably sound like generic catchphrases which everyone's used to, but very much if we hold our own technology up to these measures, these metrics, then we're happy. So well-being, is it something that makes us feel safer? Does this technology absolutely respect people's rights right from the start? I mean, there's huge uproar, and deservedly so, that artists feel like they have no control over what they have spent lifetime creating. And so we would like to build a human or a people-centered ecosystem where people feel safe. Fairness, if there's people collaborating on something, how can we recognize different people's contribution? How can we encode that into processes? How can we have a fairness of airtime if there's a group or a collaborative approach? How can that be measured? Privacy, I mentioned before, relates to data anxiety, and also relates back to Indigenous custodial law. There are certain things we're allowed to know, certain things that we have to then unknow, or what we're not allowed to know. And so respecting these boundaries becomes very important to, influencing how we construct a metaphor version of this with AI. Transparency, we've been there, accountability and sustainability. So yeah, these are some points just wanted to say with the policy discussion that everyone is, very proud of Australia. We were the inventors of the Transformer AI neural network with latent space, and we realised that, wow, our skills are up here, and a lot of appeal to that with the American market. And America is, with financing, is way better than us. So how can we leverage that with each other and work with each other? So some of the things that we were moving so fast we hadn't even thought about were sustainability. What is the impact this will have in the environment? Footprint, how do we put this into policy? Again, being the world's oldest ecology, there's an opportunity to learn from many Indigenous cultures around the world, but particularly in my perspective, Indigenous. So, yeah, like I said, we're scrambling to create policy. And what I would like to see from our discussion with the panel and audience people is how can we get policy to catch up? Should we govern this? I mean, is there a governance issue? Is it a self-determination issue? Is it things that we have to, treat internally and externally in terms of countries? If this is going to decentralize power, how do we approach that? So I am going to, in a second, hand over to the wonderful Olivia. And yeah, so next steps, this is my LinkedIn profile. If people wanted to connect, I would love that. Like I said, we're trying to launch a creative ecosystem where artists are respected. We're going to be profiling what people are doing with music. We're going to be empowering all sorts of technologies in this ecosystem, and we are going to release this in a few weeks. So if people would like to jump on there and just show their interest, that would be great. But I'd like to hand over to Olivia, if that's okay.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tim. Or is it Bandian? Your name
Bandian means cheeky brown snake.
There you go. I thought I'll try and write it down and remember it. I think it's always nice. Bandian. Okay. Thank you for that presentation. It's been quite insightful, even for us who live in Australia. You definitely taught us something new. And I love your insights from the Indigenous perspective. And the fact that you're, doing things with music and helping others, absolutely part of compassion and caring for other people. So absolutely love that.